Say live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let die.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Drop Goal podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we are joined by Joe from the Red Robin podcast to do a roundup of the Hull KR season, speak a little bit about his podcast, and a few other things about general rugby league. It's going to be a brilliant episode, and I'm happy to be joined by Joe. How are we, mate? This podcast is brought to you in association with Recovery, the natural choice for rugby recovery. You're sore, you're low on gas, and life has a habit of getting in the way when it comes to doing all those little extras you need to do to recover properly. Going into game day knowing your body is in the best condition possible is the goal, and your next performance depends on it. Well, Recovery has you covered. Recovery is reinventing rugby recovery. Check out their range of all natural products with prices that range from as little as £7 to be budget friendly for all shoppers. You can find them on Instagram at Recovery, or head to recovery.com, or simply click the link in the description to take you straight to their website. And for an extra bonus, if you use the code DROPGOAL in all capitals, you'll receive a brilliant 10% off discount on all of your purchases.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show, mate. Really appreciate it. It's the first time that I hadn't hosted one in a while, mate, so really enjoying it. Like listening to your podcast. I think with rugby league, the family sticks together, doesn't it? And apart from a certain podcast that represents the other side of the city where I'm from. But yeah, I love listening to all the rugby ones, and yourself included, mate. The ones with Chris Hill, Joe Applyeard, former teammate of mine back in my playing days. So you've had some really good guests, and I'm glad to be a part of it, mate. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate. I'm happy to have you on the podcast today, because you're obviously a bit of a Hull KR expert, so to say. So it's interesting to get a different fan's point of view on Hull KR from a neutral myself, and then obviously a Hull KR fan. It'll be a good little episode today.
Yes,
so we'll definitely just jump straight into the questions and stuff. So just explain to the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do over on your show.
Yes, obviously, like you mentioned, co-host the Red Robin podcast. Me and my, cousin, Chris Johnson, my mum's cousin. So he's a little bit older than me, but I used to commentate for the club pre-COVID, and went to the games, do all the full match analysis. Myself and a bloke called Phil Barrett, we did a show called Rovers Roundup live commentary on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But obviously, because we weren't allowed into the grounds, it kind of fizzled out, mate, and got full-time jobs. And Chris just messaged me last January and said, look, are you still doing anything for the club this year? And it's obviously the way Rovers had gone in 2020, kind of, I wouldn't say falling out of love with the club, but because of COVID behind closed doors, we was getting hammered every week. Let's be having it right. If it weren't for Toronto, would have been in a relegation battle. And I kind of was like, nah, I'm just going to step out of the media work, especially with the club, because I'd got in a few altercations with a few players that have gone now. And I didn't want to be that. You know, I love Hull KR and I want us to do well. And at the time, I was like, I'm drawing myself into a corner here. I'm painting myself into a bad picture. But yeah, we'll start this podcast, see how it goes. Hopefully we can get back into the ground. And who would have thought, 7-8 months later, mate, I'd have been able to go to a semi-final in Perpignan to watch Rovers and do like a fan blog. So gone really well. We've had some great guests, Michael Dobson, Clint Newton, Justin Morgan from them Rovers days, them glory days of our first few years in Super League. We've had Jenna Brooks recently doing our season review. She was absolutely brilliant, her enthusiasm for the game and the guys at Sky Sport. It was great to get someone like her and get her perspective of Rovers. But yeah, so I've played for the club, I've commentated for the club, and now I'm doing a podcast for the club, mate. So I'm a bit of everything, bit of an Hull KR expert, like you said, mate. But yeah, check the Red Robin podcast out. We really appreciate all you guys obviously doing this collab, mate, and long may it continue. Really enjoy doing it, like yourself.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And I'll leave a link to your social medias and stuff in the description of this podcast for anyone who wants to jump over and have a listen. I do recommend it. It's a brilliant podcast, and the Rugby League family sticks together. So do definitely go and show Joe some support on their podcast. So today, like I mentioned at the start, we'll be doing like a quick roundup of Hull KR's season with the expert himself, Joe. And it's definitely fair to say that Hull KR surpassed pretty much everyone's expectations this year. And when we flash back to this time last year, what were your expectations of Hull KR?
It's a tough one, like I said, mate. I remember on my memories at the moment when you check on Facebook and it's from a year, 2-3 years ago. All it is me quoting either a game that we've actually a year ago today. I think we've been hammered on Sky against Castleford, and then we
Right.
went to Hull in St Helens and got beat. And it was really dire straits, mate. You know, we had Tony Smith, Danny Maguire, and it was kind of like, this isn't their team. They haven't been able to recruit well because we'd finished bottom again in 2019. So he hasn't been able to build his team yet. But still, we've got a really good coach, really good assistant. We've got some good youngsters, and we still can't produce anything, mate. And
Right.
I just think expectations for 2021 was probably going to be in a relegation battle, I'll be honest with you. I think Sky had us odds on with Lee to be 11th or 12th, depending on whoever. I think at the beginning of the season, it was whoever wins out with Rovers and Lee is going to go down, because he's going to stay up, sorry. And I think when we signed the likes of Albert Vete, Corbin Sims, Brad Takarangi, Ryan Hall, there was a bit of optimism, but it was still, could we be even mid-table? And I think what COVID saw was, and what Jenna Brooks mentioned on our podcast, these guys are putting their bodies on the line for 80 minutes, but you haven't got the fans there to support you. And I think what Rovers do so well, and obviously you'll know that from being a Warrington fan as well, if you travel in numbers, and when Rovers get, you know, big away games, the derby, the quarter-final against you guys a few weeks ago, that Red Army can change the way Rovers play. And I know it sounds corny, I know it sounds daft, but until the fans came back, I really thought this team, because these new signings, they're not going to know what it's like and about to play for Hull Kingston Rovers. They're just coming to play Huddersfield on a Monday afternoon in Leeds in front of no fans. It was like, I don't know about you, but I found watching it behind closed doors, because of obviously what was going on in the pandemic and we want to get to these games, but I felt Rovers needed the fans back probably more than anyone to produce their best rugby, mate. But yeah, I don't know about you, about Rovers, but expectations for this season, I wasn't really optimistic, I'll be honest with you.
No, mate, and I'll be honest myself as well. When I did a prediction at the start of the year for the table, I think I did have Hull KR just above Lee. And I think, like you mentioned, that was a case with many people, including Sky Sports themselves, because without the fans, like you mentioned, for a lot of clubs as well, I just think there's no really, like, the fans push those players on. They give them a reason to play. Like, they like playing for the club and for the fans and stuff. And when you are a struggling club 2 years in a row like Hull KR were, they definitely needed that extra boost of the fans. And obviously, like you mentioned, behind closed doors, it's not the ideal place to be playing rugby when you're struggling. And I just thought that form would carry on into 2021. And even with those new signings, like you said, I just didn't think it would be their year to bounce back. But obviously, you know, however many months down the line, we've seen them and they've surpassed everyone's expectations, and they've been one of the best teams all year, and they've been a brilliant team to watch, mate. Which is amazing. And you did mention a few signings and stuff, but what was your thoughts on the signings made, and how overall, how do you think the recruitment went?
I think if you look at it from a realistic point, now where the season's finished and that semi-finals gone, and you kind of look back and look at the season as a whole, apart from Ryan Hall, the new signings wasn't up to scratch this year, in my opinion, mate. You look at Albert Vete, Corbin Sims, Brad Takarangi, you've seen glimpses, you've seen moments of magic from all three of them, Australian and Tonga, these exports, these packs from the Southern Hemisphere. But it's been the local lads. It's been Louis Johnson, who we signed from you, a swap with Robbie Mullane, who's absolutely played out of his sting. Matty Staunton, who'd only played 7 games for in a struggling Bradford side when we signed him in 2019, coming into 2020. Jez Litton, who Hull FC didn't want and thought Jordan Johnson was a better hooker than him. He's just one our young player, and him and Matt Parcell have formed probably the best hooking partnership in the league. And that's no disrespect to any other hookers in the league. I just think for what Parcell and Jez do for us, it's really underestimated how much them two give this Hull Kingston Rovers team. But I think if you look at the signings overall, it has been the domestic players who shone. Brad Takarangi won try of the season for that little dab, kick and chase against Salford. You've seen Albert Vete, really good crashing onto the line. But if you get him in a bit of space, he's very flat-footed. I think he needs to have, and I'd say for him and Sims, probably need to trim off a little, especially Albert Vete. We all love these big Tongans. You look at Conrad Oral, who's signed for Saints today, and these big players who are big characters. But I think Albert Vete, You look when he was playing in the NRL for the Warriors and then the Storm, he was about half a stone trimmer than he was now playing for Rovers, and it hasn't
Yeah.
helped him coming over and not doing a full pre-season. And I think when we go into 2022, that's what we'll speak about then. But for them guys, you've probably got 50, 60% out of them, and very similar to what we saw out of Sean Kenny-Dowell the previous year. And people were saying, we signed Sean Kenny-Dowell, one of the biggest names ever in modern day rugby league,
Yeah.
and he still can't produce it in Super League. And then you look at what a season he had, mate. You look at him,
Oh, yeah.
Kane Lynette,
Yeah.
Jordan Abdul, Mikey Lewis. These players have just played out of their skin and skids. Sean Kenny-Dowell, when he got captaincy, it was kind of like, oh, wow, what's he done to justify that? But I'll tell
Right.
you what, mate, what a great bloke.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, because we're so affiliated with the club, we're not allowed to have actual players on until they leave or move forward and move away from the club. But Sean keeps in touch with us. He loves living in Hull. He loves the supporters.
Right.
He loves the club. And I just think if these people can have this second season syndrome, if Takarangi, Vete and Sims, never mind when you've got Lachlan Coote coming into that fold as well, if they can carry on and do what Sean Kenny-Dowell's done this year, then Rovers will be in a really good stead for next, mate. But I think recruitment-wise, I always thought we could have built a little bit bigger in the pack. And I think even still getting to a semi-final, you look at that game against you in the quarter, which I thought we played our best ever game
Right.
in Super League, but then you go to Catalan and it was a valiant effort, but you've got people like George King, Matty Staunton, Louis Johnson. These kids are busted up, and we didn't have the manpower off the bench like Catalans did. And I still think now, even though we'll move forward to 2022 soon, I still think Rovers just need to be a little bit bigger. And you look at the likes of Alex Walmsley, you know, Chris Hill a few years back. If Rovers could have a dominant front rower, someone who's going to take a bit of stick, and I think Sims has tried to do that, but a perfect example was, you see, when we was against Lee on telly and it was like 32-28, he kind of loses his head and he was struggling against the Lee pack. I think Sims is an enforcer, but I don't think he was the man to lead Rovers forward. I think the likes of George King deserve a lot of recognition from Tony Smith, and he's finding these hidden gems, mate. Rowan Mills signing from Bradford, Ethan Ryan. We're signing these players now, a bit like what Cass did 5 or 6 years ago, what Darryl Powell did. These players who nobody else really wants, they know the good prospects, but we're going to go dab somewhere else. And Tony's turning them into a really good team, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we go next year, mate. But I'm just hoping Takarangi, Sims and Vete can kind of kick on like SKD did in their second season, because if we do, mate, you never know where this team could go.
Oh no, definitely, mate. I think if Hull KR crack on next year, they could definitely be a team to look out for. But I think there's a link between Warrington and Hull KR in the fact that I don't think the homegrown English players, I don't think they get enough recognition in the team, and I think both clubs kind of rely on the Australian or Tongan imports to kind of make that extra step and be the leader in the pack. But I think this year, especially for Hull, the likes of George King, like you said, they've really had that breakout year, and they have proved why they can't, why can they not be the leaders or the ones to take Hull forward. I think Tony Smith's done a brilliant job with the English players, especially, and like you said, finding those hidden gems and bringing them into the world of rugby league. And all of a sudden, we've got these players who we've never really seen perform at such a high level before, and all of a sudden they're absolutely ripping into the defence of every team. Like, they're just playing brilliantly, and I think that's definitely one thing that Tony Smith has done well this year. What are your opinions on the Hull KR coaching staff? Because I think, personally, Tony Smith at the wheel, I don't think you could ask for any better, to be honest.
Nah, you hit the nail on the head, mate. I think for a club of our stature, and we're doing really good things off the field, and we'll discuss that as well, but on the pitch, I think Tony Smith really bought into what it was about. We went through a few coaches since them Morgan years, early 2000s, going into, coming up in Super League. You had Sandercock, Chesney, Tim Sheens, obviously, who came over and didn't understand the British game. And we was at a loose end. We was at a really loose end. And I remember when Sheens got sacked, thinking, where do Rovers go from here? And I'll never forget, I was going into cinema to watch Supersonic about Oasis, and my phone buzzed and it said, the new coach announced in 5 minutes. And everyone was saying it was going to be Justin Morgan. And I thought, that's great, but you can't really rely on them old days. You've got to move forward. And when Tony Smith signed, it was kind of like, wow, okay, that's a bit of a statement. And I think he'll admit he was only doing it for a bit of a stopgap. He'd fallen out of love with rugby league, obviously being with you guys at Warrington a few years prior to that. But I think he's come out of his shell again, and he's a very charismatic bloke. And the identity of Hull Kingston Rovers has changed. I think you look at our two probably, I wouldn't say minor assistants, this is no disrespect, but you've got Stanley Jean, a Rovers legend, a rugby league stalwart who's working really well in the defence. You've got Dave Hodgson, who never wants to be a head coach. Dave's a great coach. He was one of mine when I was at the club, and I love the bloke. One of Super League's top try scorers on the wing, really good person to have around, especially from an outside backs. But then you've got Danny Maguire, probably the greatest Super League player of all time, in my opinion, and Tony Smith, who's won everything. He's coached Great Britain, England, yourself, Leeds Rhinos. I think with this coaching staff now and the new CEO and the chairman backing them, these players want to play for these coaches. I mean, you've got Rowan Milnes, Jordan Abdul, Mikey Lewis, 3 British halfbacks who were really shown in 2021, and they're working with Danny Maguire. There's no better mentor to have as them halfback coaches, and I think Rovers have got a little bit of everything now. You've got Maguire, who can be the halfback coach working with a span. You've got Dave Hodgson working with the outside backs, and Stanley Jean working with the prop forwards, the pack, working that middle defence, which has been very good this year. And then you've got Tony Smith, the puppet master at the top. And I just love the bloke shows not much emotion, but when he does, he knows that he means it. And I think it was Hull Daily Mail put an article out yesterday that he's coming into his last year. So is all the coaching staff. And in a perfect world, I'd love us to get off to a really good start in 2022 and announce that all 4 are going to be here for the foreseeable future, because I think Rovers are a long-term project. And I think when Tony Smith decides that's it, I think Danny Maguire will become Rovers head coach. I think that's probably 99.9% nailed on. I think that's what they're working towards. But for the next 3 or 4 years, there's no better man to take the red and whites forward than Tony Smith. I love the bloke. He's done wonders this year. And the good thing is, mate, already, Rovers are in for pre-season in 3 weeks. I think they're starting pre-season earlier than anyone. We're not resting on our laurels. We can't. We got 80 minutes away from Old Trafford. Yeah, that was brilliant. But at the end of the day, we still didn't win anything. And we've got better players coming in. We can go again. And it all starts again in 2022, mate. And I think Tony Smith, Danny Maguire, Hodgson and Jean, and most importantly, all the players and the management staff understand that they can go a little bit better in 2022.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And I interviewed Tony Smith actually for a Warrington podcast a few months back, and honestly, the love he has for Hull KR at the moment, it really shows that he is back in love with the game. Because, like you mentioned, and he mentioned to me on an interview I did with him, he did fall out of love with the game, and I think he just spent a little bit too long at Warrington. As a Warrington fan myself, I couldn't have asked for any more from him. He was a brilliant coach. And I really do think he is the one to take Hull KR forward in the next 3 or 4 years. And, in terms of media stances, when you look at Hull KR, the box office pull is Tony Smith. Like, you've got one of the best coaches of all time at Hull KR, along with Danny Maguire, one of the best Super League players. Like, you couldn't ask for any more, really. So I do think Hull KR are definitely heading in the right direction. And as well as, we'll just quickly flash forward a little bit. With the recruitment already made this year of Lachlan Coote, you know that Tony Smith's got to have played a huge part in bringing Lachlan Coote to the club. Because if you say 2 years back when you were struggling, you would never have got a player of that standard, and now you've got one of the best fullbacks in the league. Like, as a Hull KR fan, you must be really optimistic for the coming season.
I think what you notice in rugby league is, mate, I think it's the 1st of May when the transfer window technically opens. Rovers have never really been allowed to sign anyone of a high calibre because we didn't know what division we was playing in. You look back at when Tony Smith saved us in 2019 on that last day of the season, actually lost in Golden Point to Salford, but luckily London got beat at Wakefield, so we stayed up. But then we had to sign 15 players who, let's be having it right, nobody else wanted. And that's no disrespect to Ryan Brierley, Jamie Ellis, Carl Trout at the time, Matty G. But these players only did 1 season with Rovers, and then as soon as Tony realised, no, this is not my team, they've moved on to pastures new. And it's no surprise that Rovers knew there was never going to get relegated this year after the brilliant start. So we know that we can offload Adam Quinlan, whereas a few years back, Adam Quinlan's injury prone, but we're not going to get anyone better, so sign him up. Right. And now we can sign people like Lachlan Coote. We've got Sam Wood coming from Huddersfield, a really exciting outside back, only on a year deal. 2 lads in the Championship, Tom Garrett, a bit like Alex Walmsley, 6'7", just won swept up at their awards, at Dewsbury's Awards. Frankie Allen, who just played in the £1 million game for Featherstone. So we've got these young British talents coming as well, and I think Lachlan Coote took a lot of shine off the other players and the other signings. We've got Greg Richards, a grand final winner with St Helens, a grand final runner-up, with St Helens. He's been at London, but they're going part-time, so he's joining us. And Phoenix Luwali Tonga guy, PLT, who's been playing at Keighley, only started playing rugby league 6 months ago. Electric, only 18 years of age, been playing with his dad. What a really good story. That's been in League One, and now he's going to come full-time and play for Hull Kingston Rovers. So Rovers have got some really exciting propositions coming up, mate. And I think with the reserve system, then players, the latter players that I just mentioned, they're going to benefit from the reserves coming back. But I think it's just a bit of a vicious circle, isn't it? If you, for the likes of Lee and them teams at the bottom of the season this year, Salford, Wakefield, you look at who they're probably signing for next year, and they're not signing the calibre of players they're wanted because they didn't know what division there was going to be in. Whereas now, Rovers, because we were 6 and we knew we weren't getting relegated, we can go to Lachlan Coote. Is X amount of money, you're going to be our fullback for 2 years. Well, yeah, of course, I'm going to stay in England. I'm going to stay for an exciting club. Wind back the clock 2 years ago, mate. If someone had said Lachlan Coote had been playing for Hull Kingston Rovers, I'd have laughed at you. I thought, what are you playing Rugby League Live for? That's the only way Rovers are going to sign Lachlan Coote. But credit to like the likes of Lachlan Coote, Sam Wood, Garrett. They're obviously believing in this project, mate, and I think Rovers are doing really good things on and off the pitch, like we've mentioned. And I think now the goal is to carry it on, to aim for them middle positions, top 6 positions. We're not going to win stuff overnight. We're not going to turn into Melbourne Storm or Penrith next season. I think we've been brushed with the entertainers tag, and that was brilliant. But sometimes you've got to be a bit more composed, and sometimes the entertainers can get caught out. And I think Tony Smith knows that. I think even when we beat Wigan at home in front of the Sky cameras, he said, well, yeah, it was great, but we tried too hard, and we need to get better in here. And that's the thing. We're always working. We're always improving. We're back in pre-season in 3 weeks' time, earlier than anyone. That's great. You know, we need to get our fitness levels back up, get that defence up, because we know we can attack. But in some games, I think Rovers, especially, we've had our defence against you lot in the quarter-final, where I think if you could have attacked for another 80 minutes, you wouldn't have scored even another 80 minutes out of that. But then we've had some games where we concede 34 against Lee, or we get beat 30 points to 10 against Wakefield. And that's probably a sign that Rovers can still be down there and still can cough up these poor performances. You look at the derby when we was rubbish, against Huddersfield when we got smashed 4 days later. So Rovers have got to get away from that, mate. But definitely, I think there's more positives than negatives heading into 2022, definitely.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And you did mention earlier on that you were impressed with the start of this season from Hull KR. Let's say the first 10 games of the Super League season. What were your thoughts going into those first 10 games? Were there any areas where you thought, right, if we want to be up there, this is what we improve? And were there areas you were like, we've got this nailed on the head, we're brilliant? Like, what did you think overall? How did Hull KR season get off?
I think the first game of the season against Catalan, obviously we didn't know at the time that it was going to be the first. We played them 4 times that season. But again, nobody there, mate, in the crowds. I think it was 24-6 down at one point. A hat-trick from Ryan Hall, late try from George King brought us back into the game. But Rovers lost out in Golden Point. And I was like, right, same again. We know we can score. It's just defence was very poor again. And then we go to the champions the week after. St Helens lose 25-0, which most teams lose at the Totally Wicked, never mind Rovers. The week after that, Challenge Cup game again was getting closer to fans being back in the stadium, but that didn't happen for the Challenge Cup game. Was leading 28-10, I think, with about 26-7 minutes to go. Ended up losing again in Golden Point to Castleford, and that was 3 games on the bounce where Rovers probably could have won, but was like, right, nothing's going to change. Let's be having it right. We've seen this so many times, and then you look at the Huddersfield game, then we beat Huddersfield in Golden Point. Right, we've got our first win. Then we beat Leeds. We hammer Leeds at home 26-6. And it's like, right, we're building a bit of momentum. We go to you guys, Greg Inglis's first game. And I think even though it finished, 50-26, 50-28, something like that. But even at that time, until that last 20 minutes when you scored about 5 tries, we should have won. And it was kind of like, right, there's something in this team, but we just need to, I think we'll be better than most teams, but we just need to tighten it up, especially against the top guys. And then the week after, again, I'll always stick in my memory, mate, the first game back with fans, lucky enough, me and about 26 fans, Rovers fans, headed to Wealdon Road, Castleford, ended up winning 26-22, mate. And what a performance that was by the boys.
Yeah.
And then you lose against Wakefield like that, like I've mentioned, and you kind of just like, we're so inconsistent. We're still sitting about ninth, and you look at the next 3 games, which probably defined Rovers' season. The first 2 games back at Craven Park with fans. We hammered Lee at home and hammered Salford at home. And then we went to Wigan away, no away fans, same day as England, Scotland in the Euros. So it kind of took the shine off the fact that we've just beat Wigan at the DW for the first time in about 7-8 years.
Right,
and that made Rovers, I think we was about 7th at the time, mate. And it was kind of like, right, we're beating these teams now. There's something special about this team. We know we can maybe go a little bit further than we have done. We know maybe we can recruit better. I think 2 weeks after that, we announced that we signed Coote, and it was kind of all rosy. And then, as you know, COVID hit. Rovers didn't play for 7 weeks, mate. But that first 10 games of the season, Rovers won 6, lost 4. So it was the first time we probably had a higher win ratio to lose ratio in the past 6 years, because I remember in 2020 we only won 2 or 3 games. I think the first bit of the season, mate, was still frustrating because I was watching some games on the Our League app. I was lucky enough to go to some games, but again, it was that win 1, lose 2, win 2, lose 1. Rovers needed to be a little bit more consistent, mate. But again, I don't know about you, but when we first went to them games, that Castleford away game will always stick in my memory, like I've said, because we was away and I managed to get tickets. But then first games, obviously for you guys at the Halliwell Jones and for us at Craven Park, fantastic, emotional to be back in the stands. And Rovers definitely delivered. Our home form this year, mate, has been fantastic.
Oh, definitely, mate. I don't think you as a Hull KR fan or any neutrals, I don't think they could have asked for much better from Hull KR. You know, fans are finally back in the stadium, and look what a year they've had, especially at home. They've really given something for the Hull KR fans to cheer about, which, not in any disrespect, I don't think you've had too much to cheer about in the last 1 or 2 years. Because, like you mentioned, I think it was the 2020 season, I think you only got 3 wins. Like, that is poor. And as a Hull KR fan yourself, you mustn't have been impressed at all.
No, I think you said the past few years. I mean, God, I'm 24 next month, mate. I've only seen 2 promotions, 1 relegation in £1 million game against Salford, and a record defeat at Wembley. So I do believe I'll see my team win something eventually. God knows when that'll be. I might be 50 by the time that happens, but I'm sure I'll be there and I'll remember it, and it'll be amazing. But for Rovers, I've always thought, do you know what? What's happening with Rovers? You come to Craven Park, the atmosphere is electric. We sign these big names. And for the past, 10, 12 years since we've been in Super League, our highest finish has only been 4th. We've got to a Challenge Cup final once. And that's what I think Rovers fans and the club need to know now is we're not expecting to win the treble. We're not expecting to win year in, year out. But we was getting beat by the likes of Wakefield and Salford. And you see what Castleford have done on a much lesser budget and a stadium like they've got, and it's kind of like Rovers are doing everything right apart from on the pitch. And this is what this new identity of the club's about, the rebranding, the Craven Street, what Paul Aiken, the new CEO, is doing. I think what he's realised now is we're not taking no rubbish anymore. We're not signing people because we need to make up the numbers. We're only going to sign people if they want to play for this club and they're going to be part of this project. And you look at how many people have signed the past pre-seasons. It's been in the 15s, 16s. Rovers have only signed 6, with 3 academy lads, making it 9, but obviously they don't count as signings from other clubs. And that's the thing now. Rovers will have 34 in their first team man squad next year, about 10 homegrown players, which we haven't had in a long time. And we're not going to. And a shocking statistic, I think it's the first time that Rovers hasn't signed anybody on loan since 2009, mid-season, because obviously you look back at who we've signed over the past years. We've signed Adi Gardner on loan, Jason Chan, who else? Tony Politua. These guys who were great legends of the game, but they signed for Rovers when they're 37 because we've got nobody else and we haven't got an academy to produce that. Whereas now you've got these young lads coming forward, these lads who we signed from Bradford. And Tony Smith realises we can't just sign anyone to play for us. We want to be part of this identity. We're signing players who are long-term deals now. Rovers are signing people on 3-4-year deals. George King signing a 3-year extension yesterday, funnily enough. Whereas before it was kind of like, here's 30 grand, just do a season for us and then you're going to leave at the end of the year. Whereas now we know our starting 13 for next year, barring Lachlan Coote, is probably going to be the same team as last season, and that's good. You see these top teams like yourself, what you've done for years, what Leeds did in the glory days, that span never changed. And I think if Rovers can keep people on the pitch and not go through these transitions of getting rid of 10 players and signing in a dozen more, then again, that builds that cohesion, doesn't it, and that squad mentality that we're here for the long haul. It's not just a season of surviving, then we get a brand new team to survive. And I think that's been the difference as well.
Oh yeah, definitely, mate. And speaking about Rovers doing everything right off the pitch, I think the work they're doing off the pitch is phenomenal. I think they are really building a name for themselves, and I think as a neutral, I think when people think of Hull and rugby league in the past 5 or 10 years, obviously, in my opinion, the first team that comes to my mind is the Black and Whites, because over the however many years in Super League, they've probably been more successful. But recently, I'd definitely say Hull KR are definitely getting up there. You know, a poor season from FC this year, and obviously a brilliant season from you guys, and everything that Hull KR are doing off the pitch, like the sports village, which we'll speak about later, and the rebranding and stuff. It's brilliant for the club, and they are really building a name for themselves, and I think they slowly are becoming the bigger team in Hull. Just because, you know, they're getting the community involved, and that's what rugby league is about. What are your opinions on having two teams in Hull and kind of having to fight for that name almost of being the number one Hull team?
I think it's the best thing in the world, but the worst thing in the world as well, mate. I think the worst thing in the world for the reason that maybe both teams need to look at themselves and go, do you know what? As much as it is brilliant beating Hull or Hull beating us, Rovers, if that's all we're bothered about, then we're never going to be successful. The city of Hull is brilliant, mate. I love my city. It's amazing. I mean, you don't get enough credit, but you don't realise the bubble. I mean, my next door neighbour, he's a massive black and white. I'm probably one of the biggest Rovers fans ever. I'd give my right arm to go watch him in Perpignan. I could have lost my job for going to leave. I'm a teacher and I had to take a day off pay to go watch him in a semi. Do you know what I mean? And that's what the people of Hull do. But then you can never get away from rugby league. I mean, you walk down the street and you hear it. It's that childish. You see people walking in town with a Rovers shirt. I go to my partner, oh, go on, lad. If I see someone in an Hull shirt, I won't tell you what I say about them, because that's the mentality. And I know they feel the same way about us. I think Rovers, what they're doing compared to Hull is a little bit more clever. I think the marketing team are good at Rovers. I don't think Hull are communicating with the fans well enough at the moment. It's difficult. They don't own the KC. The Allams who own Hull City, the football club, and the SMC, the stadium management company, they're not very nice people, mate. I'll be honest, I'm a big Hull City fan as well, and the way our football club's run is atrocious. And Pearson and the Allams don't have a good relationship. Obviously, Adam Pearson, the Hull chairman, he was in charge of Hull City when we was in the Premier League many years ago and in the promotion early 2000s. But I think for Rovers and Hull, what the difference is probably that mentality, the likes of who Rovers sign these young players like Matty Staunton, who I've mentioned, Louis Johnson, who aren't on big bucks, who aren't on big money, and they know that, but they want to work hard. Whereas I think Hull at the moment are going through a transition of, you look at Josh Reynolds on his day at New South Wales International a few years back, great player. But you look, do you remember in the derby when he, with Rovers fan, chucked a bottle, which is unacceptable, and he drank the beer? That was the highlight of his season. And because he did that in a derby, the Hull fans forget that he's only played about 12 games and he's been bang average. The same as Maher Fanoa. He's been very poor, and you've seen he's been released to go to Castleford. Hull have paid him off. The problem for Hull FC is, mate, they've got a lot of players on big money. They're hitting their salary cap. They've got nobody off contract this year. That's why they're having to release Maher Fanoa. I think Josh Bowden's nearly on his way out. They've talked of Danny Houghton. They want people like them out. Whereas next year, Hull FC have got 17 players out of contract. They've nearly got $1 million on the cap. So I think they're definitely going to be a force in a few years. What Rovers have just got to do, keep ticking over. Don't worry about Hull. When we got beat in the derby, it could have gone there. It could have gone awful for Rovers, but we didn't. We stuck at it. And I remember you've probably seen it on Twitter when the Hull FC fan page put Jake Connor kissing our playoff hopes goodbye, and that got loads of shares when eventually Rovers made the playoffs and Hull didn't. But it's great to see that Rovers are maybe progressing a little bit better than our rivals. But I wasn't a few years back, I'll admit. a few years back, it was life or death to me. It was, if we beat Hull, yeah, that's fine. I remember in 2019, we beat them twice. We nearly got relegated, but yeah, we beat you twice, and Jimmy Carno scored in the last second, so we have one over you. Whereas you look at the bigger picture, and they was getting to semi-finals, winning at Wembley, and we probably beat them more than they beat us. But you look at the bigger picture, they've won back-to-back Challenge Cups, and I'm so envious of that. And now it doesn't change the fact that I hate them and they hate us. But what Rovers need to do now is just appreciate that we just forget about them. You know, when it's Derby Day, we have our derbies, we give it to them. Same as you guys when Widnes were in there. But we want to get away from just being like what we have been and what probably Widnes have been with you guys for years. It doesn't matter what we do 12 months of the year, but if we just beat Warrington or we beat Hull FC, then that's fine. The players are legends, the heroes. Whereas I think Rovers now are looking at the bigger picture and seeing that if we can compete with the teams around us, Castleford, Huddersfield, Leeds, Hull FC as well, let's be honest, they'll still be middle table next year. But I think the derby in Hull, mate, it's a unique thing. Like I said, I teach so many kids who are Hull fans. I teach so many kids who are Rovers fans. My family are massive East Hull Rovers fans. I've grew up in East Hull, never left. I don't think I ever will. And you've got people the same in West Hull. Of my partner's family, a few of their family are Hull fans. It doesn't mean that we'll never be friends, but God, that derby week, mate, you'll know as well, and you'll be with Wigan and Saints. You've obviously got that a little bit more than us, but that one, probably the derby that means the most is this inner city rivalry. And I think for Hull, they need to maybe go back to basics and do what Rovers have done and go for domestic talent and not pay these big Aussies massive bucks to come over. There was on about signing Kane Evans, and the bloke can't finish a game in the NRL because he gets tackled once and throws a punch. How is he going to fit in with that mentality when you've got Jake Connor doing that? And Jake Connor's an amazing player, but he's not going to play for England because he can't keep his mouth shut. And Rovers are a bit more switched on, I think, than Hull this season, but that might change next season. In a year, we might be doing another review, and I'm going, God, we're back to basics. But long may that continue, mate, that Rovers get one over the black and whites, because obviously you'll know by me posts on Twitter, I'm very enthusiastic about us being a little bit better than them.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And as someone who doesn't follow Hull KR as much as you, obviously, because you're a diehard Hull KR fan, I can't say I am an expert or I know too much about the club. But you know, from this year, what I have learned is Hull KR, they do have that spirit, they do get the fans involved, and they do have that family feeling around the club, which is something which is brilliant, because I think it's something that Warrington, obviously a Warrington fan, I'm going to say we're a good community, but we do have our moments where, you know, we're not the fans to look at and say, yeah, they're the perfect fans or anything. But with Hull KR, they really are a brilliant community. Which is amazing for the sport. So this year, you know, what key moments that stand out for you are, because in me, you've got Ryan Hall, the club's top try scorer. What a brilliant signing he's been, almost back to his best days. Ben Crooks, you know, the fastest try. It's just a landmark and something that brings attention to Hull KR. But what were the key moments that stood out for you this year?
I think the key moments, there's a lot. I think you will always look back at this season and with fond memories. That first win against Huddersfield, how vital that was. You know, in Golden Point, Jordan, just before it was going to go to Golden Point, I think 30 seconds before, Jordan Abdul getting that drop goal really sent us on our way. Then back-to-back wins against Leeds, as again, like I mentioned, that Castleford game. There's been some really key moments, mate. I think the two back-to-back wins against Lee and Salford at home, the double over Wigan, that Castleford victory when a few weeks before we played you in the quarter-final, and then that quarter-final against you guys. I think there's been massive turning points for Rovers this season. You look at what happened after the Derby defeat. We lost to Wakefield and Huddersfield and Hull in the space of 9 days. And I'll be honest with you, I thought, God, right, that's our season over. We managed to beat Lee quite comfortably at Magic Weekend. That Castleford game on Sky when we beat them 26-19. Never seen, I was in the East Stand, mate. I normally go in the North Stand with my family, but I'd managed to get in the East Stand. I was part of Craven Street, and that atmosphere, I don't know about you watching it on telly, and I've watched it back, and there was only 6,500 there, and it sounded like there was 80. And you mentioned the community spirit of the club, and I think that's what's unique about Rovers. is the fact that Hull's a massive rugby league city. Of course it is, and Hull's bigger than Warrington, Saints, Wigan, and even though the attendance for Rovers has been quite poor this year due to COVID and due to people being getting back in, but that Craven Street, that rebranding, Mossy Massoy, Mossy's been huge for Rovers. When he walked out against Castleford, I'll admit I had a tear in my eye. Everyone did, because the bloke's just a legend. What he's gone through, him and his family, that they can walk out, and I think that's that when he walked out and he passed that ball to Sean Kenny Dow, from that moment, that was kind of like, right, our game faces on now. We've got to do it for this bloke. His last ever game at Craven Park until he eventually, hopefully, comes over. Wellens obviously is going home in a few weeks. He's got one more dinner at the club, a final goodbye. I think him and Rob Burrow have been absolute inspirations this year. I know Danny Maguire's took a lot of inspiration what Burrow's done and we're fighting against MND, but Moss has been a massive part, I think. The rebranding of the club, like I've mentioned, I'll admit at first I wasn't really a fan. You're very traditionalist, aren't we? And that's probably the problem with rugby league. We want change, and as soon as a change happens, it's like, no, it shouldn't have changed this way. But I think it works well. Rovers made a record gate of money through the kits and through the shirts and the training gear. The income in the shop is the highest in 24 hours due to the rebranding. I'll admit I was very shocked, but you see all the youngsters wearing it now. The Robins, that's the trademark. That's the modern day thing now, isn't it? You look at football in America, they've all got mascots, they've all got these nicknames, and that's why it sells. Whereas you could go back 20, 30 years, that wasn't really a massive thing, but rugby league really is changing, mate. And I think what Rovers are doing on social media, they've done a new mosaic for the past 140 years, which is brilliant. And it's these little things. Rovers always keep the fans involved. They always release new gear, and it's money making. Of course, it's money making, but they're not daft, because Rovers fans will give Rovers their last penny, and we'll stick by the club. We did in COVID. We'll do it now. We'll do it in 10, 20 years, mate. And I think that community spirit in East Hull, especially these working class people, when Rovers do well on the pitch, we're so grateful. We are so grateful. We'll stick by the club through the bad times. So I'm glad that it is turning into the good times now. But that Craven Street's great as well. Spoke to Jenna Brooks, like I mentioned. She thinks it's brilliant. If you come over next year, mate, it's great for away fans as well. Obviously, there's no massive hostilities apart from when it's the derby. I'm going to be curious to see how that's managed, mate, because I think a few people, if they've had a few too many in Craven Street, I hope it doesn't go overboard, because obviously that could be the only issue. But when we played Castleford, there was about 50, 60 Cas fans in there, and it's that income, that revenue for the club. I actually did a podcast. I know we're doing this one, but I did a podcast with Rob Crossland, who was Rovers vice chairman, and he said the problem that Rovers have had for so many years is people have drunk around the area and people have ate around the area, but there's nothing at the club. There's nothing at the club that people want to go and drink. Whereas now, we'll go to Craven Street 2 hours before kickoff. The academy are playing 2 hours before kickoff. It's these little things that might gain a few extra thousand each week for Rovers, but you accumulate that over 12 months, and that's when you can start, and you've got a bit more money, and you can sign players like Lachlan Coote. It's a business, innit? And I know it sounds daft at the end of the day, but everything Rovers do off the pitch benefits Rovers on the pitch in the long run, and I think that's brilliant. They've worked really well this year, Rovers off the field. Paul Lakin, CEO, Neil Udgell coming back as chairman, Tony Smith head of recruitment with Danny Maguire and Lakin, the marketing team, the social media team, a bit like you guys at Warrington when they do stuff with Wolfie. We get the mick took about us and stuff, but no, every exposure, all press is good press, isn't it? And as long as people are talking about Hull Kingston Rovers, then people are talking about Hull Kingston Rovers. And I think that's the difference. People are talking about us now, whereas we've been in the shadows for too long.
Yes, mate. Well, speaking about marketing, and I mentioned earlier on, the team has expanded, not just as a club, but as well as a business. Like you said, the quickest amount of sales in 24 hours. They've rebranded with that new logo, as well as the opening of Craven Street, which is almost like a fan sports village with entertainment, street food, beer, of course, and a lot more. What are your thoughts? Obviously, you've just spoke a bit about, but what are your thoughts on this concept, and as a whole, how does it help Hull KR grow as a business, and have that money to, I don't know, maybe in 5 years, sign a future club legend or someone who, stuff like that. Because little stuff like this, which people may not think too much about, in the long run, does a lot for the club in terms of marketing and money-wise. So how do you think this new strategy will help the club?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a long process, mate. I think the only problem that Craven Street's going to have is the early games. I think, let's be realistic, February, Rovers and Salford, first game of the season, maybe 2-3 degrees in East Hull in January, February. How many people want to go and sit outside a marquee and drink? Do you know what I mean? I mean, the big drinkers in East Hull and the City and Rugby League in a Hull, they don't get me wrong. But I think maybe they're going to have to look at maybe getting a heating system in there or something like that. It's great. They have local bands on. They have Michael Carter, Hull KR shirts, a bloke who's collected shirts, a massive Rovers fan. He takes his collection and people get photos with him, so it gets his exposure out there as well. Like as mentioned, it's got local bands who are playing music who wear Rovers shirts, and it's little stuff like that. It's getting the community involved. They've got Rufus and Rover, the mascots, doing face painting, and as cheesy and as corny as it sounds, mate, it gets the kids and it gets people spending, it gets the families going. People don't want to go. I mean, my locals are a good 15 minutes away from the ground, and that's in car, four in hand. And I think people have come to the realization that we could have lost so much more in COVID with our rugby league clubs. We're not Man City, we're not Barcelona, or well, funny, they're in struggles out there, but take Man City, Chelsea, these teams, for example, they could never have fans in, but they'd still generate hundreds of £1 million a year. You look at Rovers, who won't even be touching $1 million on the salary cap, never mind making that money. So I think it's really brought the community together. I think it's helped that Rovers have been doing well on the pitch. I believe attendances will go up next season because people were still scared to go, and rightly so. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. You've got old people who won't have been double jabbed and all stuff like that, and who don't want to risk it and take their elderly families there. But I think that'll ease off, especially once we get out of winter, once we get out of the cold weather and stuff. I think it'll be great. I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like when the likes of you guys, Leeds, Hull FC, because the games we've had, it's kind of just been only for home fans. So once that gets better, and I think it needs a few touch-ups. I think the ground needs tarmacking. There could be a little bit more space. There's a lot of room on the back where the old scoreboard used to be, so they could maybe do that out, make it a bit of a bigger screen. But yeah, it's looking really well, mate. I think Craven Park gets a lot of stick, and I don't understand why. You go to Cass, Wakey, Salford, these tin sheds, and what Rovers are doing. And I think the West Stand, they want to revamp that in the next few years. I think that's the biggest issue. Buying the stadium is going to be huge. I think Paul Lakin sees this vision of maybe having behind the East Stand, there's a school, but there's a massive playing area where the academy plays, and it's okay, but it's not the best. It's just a general grassland. They want to redevelop that. They want to make it as a bit of a campus, a bit of an academy, so everyone's under one roof, a bit of a training ground as well. Not to the extent of to what Man City have got or Leicester, what they're doing, but if everyone's training, everyone's playing under the same code, everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet, and we don't have to go to our local swimming baths to have recovery. If we can have something at the grounds, it's all these little things. If we can make Craven Park into a bit of a campus and a bit of a fan experience, hopefully it'll set the path for the other clubs as well, because let's be having it right. As much as I want Rovers to develop and Rovers to grow, even these old style grounds, Cass and Wakey and stuff like that, it's great that Castleford are going to have a new ground in 5 years at Escape on Junction 32, because it's a dump. And what is going to attract sponsors to go to sponsor Castleford, to sponsor Wakefield? 3,000 blokes from West Yorkshire stood in a mud pile under a tin shed. Do you know what I mean? Let's be realistic. And I want rugby to grow. I want the RFL to get better. I want the game to be recognised, because I know it, you know it. All the fans of every other club know what a great sport it is. But we're just lacking a little bit of leadership from the top. And I think Rovers, and you see like McManus, the chairman of Saints, the chairman of Huddersfield, what Tony Smith's doing now, they're ambassadors for the sport. And I think that's what we need. We need more blokes like this, people who are going to speak up and say, no, we're changing this. We're going to change this badge. I don't care. It's been Rovers' badge for 60 years and it's going to pee people off. Whereas it did me at first. And now I'm going, no, I can see the benefits of it. And that's the thing. If Rovers can keep doing stuff like that and others follow, we don't know where the game can go, because I do think it needs to grow, mate, because
Yeah, yeah,
Let's be fair, it's in a bit of a sorry state, isn't it? As much as we love
yeah.
speaking about it, as much as we love speaking about our clubs, but you look at the bigger picture, you look at the owners and you look at the people who run the show, Ralph Rimmer, the less said about him, the better. I think we need
Right,
to
right.
change it in Hull, don't we? And I think what Rovers are doing could be a benchmark. It could be a great start, and long may it continue for the other clubs as well, mate, because I think if we can all move forward, we can all develop, we can all expand our branding, we can expand our stadiums. You look at the NRL getting a new 17th team in the Dolphins for next year. Again,
Yeah,
Dolphins, it's that marketing, isn't it? It's these mascots, it's these logos. It sounds daft, me and you were speaking about it, but that'll generate money in the long
yeah,
run for these clubs.
yeah, definitely, mate. So I do want to speak about partway through the season for KR because it was quite an interesting time. The team was linked with some top name players. Toby King was rumored to be joining his brother, and joining the Robins, as well as Blake Austin, who was at Warrington at the time. He was rumored to be joining the club, and also Lachlan Coote has now obviously been confirmed to be joining the club. But all of a sudden, you've got top name players being linked with Hull KR. This early intent of signing big name players and signing these players to build a squad around and finally like have a stable, like I don't know how to put it, but they need a stable squad, and they've showed that early intent of they're building that at Hull KR. This is surely a sign of positive things to come in the years to come, right?
Yeah, even to be linked with them players at first, mate, and it was kind of, I'll admit, we got a little bit excited. I was like, what? So we're going to line up with Lachlan Coote, Ryan Hall, Sean Kenny-Dowell, Toby King, Blake Austin. I think the form of Sean Kenny-Dowell, Abdul and Lewis, especially for Austin, people were very dubious about signing Blake Austin because it was like, where we're going to fit these. We've got 3 half-backs where we can't play him at full-back because we've got Coote signing. Who's going to be leaving? That means one of our Aussie exports are going to be leaving. I think the one guy who I'd have loved is Toby King.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I think it was very, very close. Very close, and it was kind of a last minute thing. I think from you guys, is it Fitzpatrick, isn't it? Is it Fitzpatrick, the CEO and the recruitment? I think he gave Toby King a bit more money than what he was going to be getting at Rovers, and that maybe swung towards it. I think he wanted to come play with George. I remember the Wakefield game, George had got injured and he was walking down, and I spoke to him. I said, is it close? He said, very. He said, don't take my word for it, but he said, it's very, very close. And I thought, it's done. It's done. But when it didn't happen, look at his interview. He said, look, I spoke to a guy who was really close, and he had a lot of praise for the club. I know he'd come over to East Hull. He'd spoke with Tony Smith, Danny Maguire, and I think he really wanted part of it. But he wanted part of what you guys have got at Warrington as well. But to be linked with Toby King, an international, Blake Austin, an international, after already signing probably the joint or second best fullback in Super League, however you want to see it, as much as I do, is a lot better than, like I said, having to sign people from the Championship who nobody wants, who's played Super League 10 years ago and got 10 games under his belt, so he'll fit a number on 24 grand a year and not put much on the salary cap. But yeah, it's miles better, mate, to be linked with these players. Again, I'd have probably, a lot of people wouldn't have done, but I'd have really liked Chris Hill to come to Rovers, being obviously with you as a Warrington fan. I know he's gone to Huddersfield. The problem is with Hull, mate, is it's hard for us to recruit people from Lancashire because of the commute. It really is. You look at Chris Hill now, he probably lives in Warrington, doesn't he? Or he lives in the area.
I think
he's
he
moving
lives
to
Wigan, so close.
Lives in Wigan.
Yeah.
So he's moving to Huddersfield. It'll take him 40 minutes to get there.
Exactly.
It takes me 40 minutes to get into work, and I live 5 mile away in Hull traffic. Do you know what I mean? From my place of work. Whereas if he's coming to Hull and he doesn't want to move, a perfect example was James Greenwood. When he was at Rovers, he was still living in Wigan. That's a long, long way to travel 4 days a week. I mean, when we come over to you guys on a Friday night, it takes me 3 hours to get there from work. And Joel Tompkins, he actually bought a house in the area. I know he ended up going to Catalan, and we know what he did there. Harvey Levette, that's why he signed to Salford, because he didn't want to come and live in Hull, because it's a long, long way away. I know it sounds daft, but it's 2.5 hours, 3 hours. It's not just a 10-minute drive to go see your family, whereas what you guys have got over in Lancashire, and what probably a few guys have got in Leeds with Wakey, Castleford, Dewsbury, Batley, you're all in the same area. I think what's the distance? There's about a 12-mile circle, isn't there, between all you teams? And whereas for us, our closest game is still 45 minutes away, apart from And that's on a good day going to Cass and Wakey if we forget the
Yeah.
derby. So I think that's always been our problem. We need people to buy into this project. Tony Smith, he lives near me now. He lives in East Hull in the area. You
Hmm.
see him biking in the local areas. He's bought a house. You see all the Albert Vette, he lives only about 5-6 streets away from me. Corbin Sims lives in Marina in town. We're not signed. You look back at 6-7 years ago, we had like Sean Lunt, James
Yeah.
Greenwood. It was called the Lancashire and Huddersfield bus. And as good as that seems, all of them travelling over, James Donaldson, but they're travelling an hour and a half before they even get to training. That's going
Mm.
to put them off signing for Rovers. And that's our problem. And that's probably why, in the end, Toby King didn't work, because it's relocating. Yeah, I know he'd have been with his brother, but he's got a missus, hasn't he? I
Yeah.
don't know if he has a
Yeah.
family or anything, but obviously his parents and George's parents will be in the middle. So again, that's the only problem with Hull, is the location. We're a long, long way away from all you guys. I know
Hmm.
it's only 2.5 hours away, and these Aussies travel 2.5 hours to work, don't they, when they're back home? And you look at the
Yeah.
NRL games, they have to get a 6-hour flight sometimes between New South Wales and Queensland. But I
Mm.
think for recruitment wise, mate, yeah, really nice to be linked with these players. Long may it continue. I think we still could recruit a little bit more for next year. Will that happen? I don't know. I'd like to
Mm.
see us recruit maybe another outside back and the prop forward. But
Yeah.
there's not many people out there, mate. Like I said, Chris Hill, I think he'd be perfect off the bench for Rovers, or starting, do 20
Yeah.
minutes. He's coming
Yeah.
to the end of his career. He's going to do that for Huddersfield, and he'll work well in Huddersfield Park. It's not going to be like it was 6-7 years ago. He's never going to be
Right.
challenging for international honours again, is he? He's past that now. But
Mm.
I think if you look at what Rovers are missing, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, probably that enforcer, that experience.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people, when I mentioned it on the Rovers podcast about players who I wanted to sign, I mentioned Chris Hill. There was the young bachelor from Wakey. He ended up
Yeah.
signing another deal at Wakefield. And I can't remember who the outside back was now, mate. But yeah, I think probably Hull's just a bit too far for some people, like I've mentioned the
Yeah.
previous names in the past 2-3 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think you might be right, mate. And I will leak something. After I did my interview with Tony Smith, me and my fellow Warrington fan Carl, who I did the Warrington podcast with, we did ask about is Tony Smith signing for them, and he obviously said he can't reveal anything, but he said what he thinks is that Toby King will be leaving Warrington, whether it's to play for Hull KR or not. So obviously he was just as optimistic as you fans, and he thought himself that Toby was going to go and join Hull KR or another team, which is brilliant for Hull KR, because it does show that now they're doing a little bit better. They can attract these names, and if these players want to be a part of the project, they are willing to go over to Hull and travel 3 or 4 hours, from wherever they may live, to live or even buy a house up there. They're willing to do that now, which is brilliant, because like you said, in the past, all the players would travel up to Hull. Which is brilliant for the club, definitely. And with the new season on its way, we do have a while to wait. But pre-season for OKR is just 3 weeks away, I think you mentioned.
Mm.
But what are your thoughts for the upcoming season? Are you optimistic?
Do you know what? I think it's just because I've been so used to having a poor season and not really expecting. I've always expected too much, whereas this season I expected too less, and it's
Right.
so frustrating to be like that, mate. But even still, in my head now, I'm trying not to get too overboard. I think a lot of people, Rovers fans and neutrals, are thinking because we've got Lachlan Coote, that's the end. That's the end
Yeah.
package. Rovers
Yeah.
have got everything now. I don't think Rovers have got everything now. You look at our injury list last season, Elliot Minchella doing his ACL second game of the season, Dean Hadley dislocating his shoulder 3 times, Ethan Ryan Hall having these end of season injuries. Eventually we know Ryan Hall came back. Albert Vette missing 9 games, Corbin Sims missing 10, 12 games. So you look, 6 or 7 games, you look at what Rovers' injury list has been, and it's been a lot worse than other teams. And I think Rovers haven't got enough credit for that as well. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, it's been the likes of Jez, Matty Staunton, Louis Johnson, Kenny Dowell, these guys who haven't missed a game, who are playing 80 minutes week in, week out. I just think Rovers could do with a little bit more backup. And because you already look at the props, for instance, we've got 8 props lined up, but 2 of them are academy players. One of them is Anisu Madotti, who has been on loan at Doncaster, who's had a very mediocre season at Doncaster. He hasn't played much at all. We don't know the situation with him. So already you're down to 6 props. Two of them have been Albert Vete and Corbin Sims. If they're not fit and something happens again with them, you've got 4. And no disrespect, it's Will Maher, Greg Richards, Matty Staunton, who's been amazing. But Will Maher and Greg Richards, are they the guys who are going to lead from the front and be your winning the pack? And winning the ruck's massive, especially for Rovers, how we play. We need to dominate the middle, because when we win the pack, we win the ruck and speed the play up. Matt Parcell and Jez Litton are dynamite. You can't stop them. When we play behind a beaten pack, you saw it in the derby. We was awful. We played with a beaten pack. Jez and Matt Parcell couldn't put a move on. We struggled. Rowan Mills, Mikey really struggled, and that was no fault of our own. Rugby league's quite a simple game. When we dominate teams down the middle, our outside backs do the easy way. You look at Sean Kennedy, the meters he made against Salford, Lee, Wigan, Castleford when we're winning. He's unbelievable. The offloads him and Ryan all got, but then you take it back to games when we got beat against Wakefield. I think we put about 6 moves on in the full game, and we didn't produce a second stanza of play. And that's the difference. When Rovers are on form, Rovers are on fire, and nobody can beat them. I'd have loved to have seen us play Saints a few more times. We only played them once at the beginning of the year. I think we'll get to play them 2 or 3 times next year, and I'm looking forward to that, because I do think we can challenge them. We run them close a few times, even in the past few years. But what Rovers probably are missing, like I've mentioned, mate, I'd love us to go one more, get a utility forward, someone who can play prop, loose forward, second row, an outside back. But one massive player who's coming back for us is Elliot Minchella. He was a shining light in a very poor season in 2020, and he had a really bright future ahead of him. Doing his ACL has really put him on the back foot. His road to recovery, his journey's been amazing to follow. He's put a bit of timber on, but he's a really versatile forward. Obviously, we remember him from Leeds, his days with the Rhinos, then going to Bradford. He's going to be one to watch for me, because he's going to come straight into the team, in my opinion. I'm nervous for him. I can't wait for him to play his first pre-season match and take his first running, because then all these emotional go, and he's right, nothing's happened, I'm back to it now. But his journey's been great to follow, and him and Dean Hadley will be great to get us back in our pack. But again, mate, I'm optimistic. I think we won't be fighting relegation. I think we need to be. It's hard, because I'm saying that and people might be listening and going, you've just finished 4th technically, or 3rd, however you want to look at it, in Super League, and you're thinking we're going to be fighting relegation. But it's just because it's Rovers, and you don't realise how attached I've been and how attached us fans have been, and with what we expect and what we think is going to happen. I think if we can finish mid-table, get into a playoff spot again, that's probably where we need to look at. Maybe having to come again to you guys, or go to Wigan again, or that's probably the route we're going to have to take. I don't, people are going, you're going to be top 4, top 3, top 2. You know what I mean? You've still got some very, very good teams, mate. Very good teams. You guys always do great, don't you? You've got Wigan, who are always on form, and St Helens, who are going to be up there. Catalan are going to want to go 80 minutes further out there. I think they're signing Mitchell Pearce to replace James Maloney, so it's just a tit for tat. You're competing with Catalan and Saints, and you guys who've got money, and we are a work in progress. We're only a year into it. We've got a long, long way to go before we're seen as a steady top 5, top 6 club. But can we get there in the next 4 or 5 years? Yeah, of course we can. But we just need to keep building. We don't want to be saying, right, we're going to win stuff next year. We might not. We might not win stuff the year after. But what we can't be is going back and getting into them dogfights with Salford, Wakefield, Toulouse, Castleford for some reason. They're going in a transition now. Rovers have got a really good chance to get away from that pack, get away from that bottom 4, compete with the middle guys, and have the odd victory against Wigan, Saints, Warrington, Catalan, not just be cannon fodder, going to you guys on a Friday night and going, if it's not 40, it'll be a bonus. And I don't think this team will be. I think this team's different. This team's going to maybe go the same as what we've done. I think that could happen, but you never know what happens, mate. Someone could break the leg first game of the season. Touch wood, that doesn't happen. But you never know what happens in a rugby season. Already, Lachlan Coote's had surgery. He's not training until January. Little stuff like that, mate, can disrupt that span. And it's going to be a rocky road. It's going to be a rocky journey. We're going to have ups and downs. So is every team. But I think if Rovers can manage the storm, be consistent like they have been this year, pick up 3 or 4 wins on the bounce, it can really set you apart from the likes of Wakefield, Salford, Toulouse, who are going to be coming up, Huddersfield, Castleford. Hull FC. If Rovers can beat them teams, that's half the job in itself. You only need to win a few more and you're guaranteed a playoff spot. Do you know what I mean, mate? But yeah, so I think the only way is up for Rovers. We can't go back down. We can't drop back down. I don't think we will with Tony at the realm, with these players coming in. I'm looking forward to seeing Coote, Parcell, Jez, Mikey Lewis, Jordan Abdul, Rowan Milnes. That span is probably up there with one of the top 4 in Super League now. If we can just get it right in the pack, and we can just get our defence sorted, we could be nearly the completed article, mate. But I think Rovers have still got a bit of a way to go before we can be even talking about that.
Yeah, definitely, mate. As a neutral myself, I do have high hopes for Hull KR. I do think, like you said, they are a project and they're a work in progress. But I think you've got all the foundations. I think you've got everything you need to be successful. And in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, you could be a staple name in rugby league and a top 4, top 5 finish every year, which is obviously what you and I think neutral fans want that as well, because for the past 10 years it's always been the same teams at the top, but I think there is change coming, which is brilliant for the sport, definitely. And it's interesting to hear your opinions about Hull KR, because like you said, you're there saying, oh, well, you don't know if you might be back in a relegation because it's Hull KR. But you having that optimism of, yeah, we could finish top 5 again this year, it is brilliant to have, because like I mentioned, you know, it's been the same the past however many years of the teams at the top. It's been a good chat about Hull KR today, but I do want to mention your own podcast, considering you've taken your time out your day to come on mine. So it wouldn't be fair if we didn't talk about your podcast. The Red Robin podcast. It's a brilliant podcast. Anyone who's listening, please, I'll drop the links in the description. Go and take a listen. It's a brilliant podcast. It's a dedicated Hull KR podcast, as you might be able to tell. You've reached incredible numbers this year. It's been amazing to watch your progress. I remember when you first started up, and I messaged you on Instagram saying I'd love to work with you in the future. And the past 8 months or so, you've just absolutely shot up. And you're one of the most popular rugby league podcasts in the country, which is brilliant, and worldwide as well. I've noticed that you have had some worldwide viewers. So I just want to give you a moment so you can speak about your podcast and what you do and what your plans are going forward.
Oh, thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. Really kind words there. And same to you. I love listening to yours and stuff. I remember, like I said, when we messaged, obviously we messaged each other a few weeks back, didn't we, to do this, to link up together finally. The time goes quick. It's so busy. Yeah. I remember at the beginning of the season, and I think what we noticed at the podcast is the guests have really, really helped. And that's for you as well. But because we're a Rovers podcast, sometimes we do our heritage cast where we've had the likes of Josh Mansell, who I know has come on your show as well. What a great bloke. We've had so many different guests. We've had Scott Morrell, a East Hull Rovers legend from our championship days, a proper character. You've had Clint Newton, one of the most recognised blokes in the NRL. He's the player welfare officer now for all the players, so he's really connected. Michael Dobson, Rovers probably most skillful ever player in the Super League era. Andrew Heffernan, who was part of us for a few years before he had to retire early due to concussion. We've had Josh Mansell, who's experienced relegation. Justin Morgan, who's been a coach. Rob Crossland, who's been a chairman. We've had fans, a real famous fan called Adge Cutler, who set up the Rovers supporters group, which saved Hull Kingston Rovers in 1997 from administration, and he still spends so much money on the club out of his own back, him and Keith, who he works with and run the RSG. So like I mentioned, that Rovers is a community club, and I think we've seen that during this pandemic and during this podcast. When me and Chris started it up, there wasn't much hope, mate, I'll be honest with you, and that's why I was hesitant to do it. I wasn't allowed to go into the ground. I hadn't been in 8-9 months, whatever it had been at the time. Kind of wasn't, I wouldn't say I wasn't interested in 2021. I was just kind of, what season's it going to be? Are we ever going to get games? We obviously, we know what could happen with postponements. But then getting people like Jenna Brooks on, who's got nothing to do with Rovers, but she's so highly thought of at Sky Sports, a massive character. Obviously, the women's game, the international game's been developing. We've got guests coming on the show. I've got George Lawler and Adam Quinlan, who are leaving the Robins in a few weeks' time, and then officially when they get signed off and George becomes a Castleford player and Adam moves on to pastures new, we don't know where he's going to go yet. They're going to come on the show. We've got another former player coming on, and for next year, I think what I'm going to try, what I want to do is get it out there again. It's again, we're a working project, but like you mentioned, the numbers have been great. We've had 28, 29, 30,000 listens and people listening in Nepal, Iraq. It's like, why are people listening to Rovers in Iraq? Do you know what I mean? And that could be anyone. That could be someone with the military over there. Like, do you know, our guys over there. For me and Chris, that's why we do it. You know, we both have full-time jobs. We do it off our own back, but it's got me interviews on RTV. It made me go to Catalan in a semi-final to do content on the club that I love and that I followed. Chris has done stuff for Betfred. I'll say he did it for Betfred because they actually wanted me, but I'm a bit too young, mate, and they have betting rights, so they had to get the older kid Chris on. So if you wondered why I went on Betfred, guys, that was because I'm a little bit too young and I'm not as old as Chris yet. But it's getting us out there. It's getting us on local radio, Humberside, Beverley FM, little stuff like that. I know it don't mean much to many people, but for us doing it, and you yourself, mate, doing these podcasts, it's just about getting it out there. In it, and I think what I've really enjoyed is listening to people, and it's been nice today for you to host it and for me to chat, because sometimes when you're asking the questions, you're kind of structured, aren't you? And you want to be professional. You don't want to get people on the show and think this is a waste of time. These guys don't have a clue what they're on about, and it's quite nerve-wracking. I mean, I don't know much about much stuff, mate, but Rovers and rugby league, international and domestic, same as you, I can talk for hours about it. You know, I talk on any podcast. I absolutely love doing it. And I don't know about you, mate, but this season, it's been a joy to provide stuff for these people, for our listeners, because I think what the guys who listen to our podcast have realised as well is, if people want to come on the show and have a rant, they can come on the show and have a rant. We don't wait for the club. As much as I love Rovers and I want Rovers to do well, if Rovers are doing rubbish, I'll say Rovers are doing rubbish. And I've and this is why I've enjoyed doing an independent podcast. Bearing in mind this year, I haven't had much to slag Rovers off about. We've had the odd rubbish result, but mainly it's been positive. But for us guys, it's a bit of a release mechanism as well, because if I'm frustrated, I know I can do a podcast and say, right, I'm not just going to slag a player off. I'm going to say, I thought he lost the ruck too many times. I thought he missed too many tackles. I want people to think, oh, he knows what he's talking about. I do get a lot of stick. I get a lot of criticism sometimes because I'm a bit too opinionated. I'm a bit too passionate, but that's what gets the views. That's what's getting people talking. And that's what I've realised, mate. No, bad publicity is good publicity. Do you know what I mean? Whoever's talking about you, whoever's getting your name out, if it's doing podcasts like this, if it's going on RTV, if it's doing volunteering, it's just getting our names out there. And I've loved doing it, mate. I don't know about you this year, but I really enjoy giving the content. And long may it continue for both of us, because I think as long as the rugby league podcasts are going, it keeps us interacted with the fans, and especially the World Cup next year. Yeah, I'm really excited for the World Cup. Obviously, England are playing this weekend. Jordan Abdul, our Man of Steel nominee, he's playing the first Rovers play since 2014, and that was Josh Hodgson, who was moving to Canberra at the time. He's in line to make his first team debut. Few guys at Warrington. I know young Connor Wrench is starting centre now. Harry Newman's not playing. So for us guys watching on Saturday, there's still international rugby, and now for next season we've got the World Cup, and we're going to do podcasts for that as well. So really impressed with how it's all gone, mate. I know you'll be as well. I'm really grateful for everyone who listens, who takes the time out, if that's when they're running into work, passing the time, whatever. It doesn't matter, because when you're listening to us, you know, it's giving us more exposure, and the same as you at the Drop Goal podcast. It's been really good, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been brilliant, mate. It's an absolute pleasure to just make the content and get involved with the fans and stuff. And I just must mention what you've done this year with the Red Robin podcast. It's absolutely phenomenal. And myself, honestly, the numbers that you guys have produced, it shocked me because I've listened to it multiple times, and it's such a good podcast. But you'd never expect anything to get 30,000 listeners in 8 months' time or whatever. It's absolutely brilliant, mate. So I must congratulate you on that.
Oh, thank you, mate. Same to you as well, mate. I mean, I know you, like you mentioned at the beginning, you haven't done loads recently because you've had commitments and stuff. But yeah, it's been great. It's really, and like I said, because we're so based on one club, we thought, we're not going to get as many because it'll be quite opinionated. People won't like us because we're a Rovers podcast, or Rovers fans won't like us because they don't agree with what we're saying. Whereas if you look at these channels, these football channels now, and because they have such a following, they have thousands and thousands, whereas rugby, it's not a massive sport worldwide. And like I said, if we can be a very, very small, and I mean a very small factor to why people are talking about rugby league, then we've probably done our job, even as volunteers of the game and as doing podcasts. That's what, we don't get paid for it. We do it off our own back, same as you guys. And that's what we didn't start it to make money. We started to speak about it and have that interaction with our fans, and for you to, have great guests on the show like you had. I really enjoyed the one with Kate, even though he's an old player now. Where I played with Joe for many years, and he was really good. The Blake Wallace one, little stuff like that. And for you getting these great guests on, it just spreads the word, mate, doesn't it? And definitely 2022, we've got a World Cup, we've got the games back to normal. Hopefully, no more postponements. Hopefully, a full season. We've got Toulouse, two French teams. Rugby league is on the verge of something special. I just think if we can get it right at the top, then all the work underneath it will go into place, because the product's there. The game's amazing. The grand final was fantastic. Our game in the quarter was fantastic. We've got these up-and-coming clubs, us, Catalan, Toulouse now. So the game's there. The marketing's there. I just think it just needs to be marketed correctly. And then hopefully the sport can grow, because that's ultimately what we both want.
100%, mate. It's definitely on the verge of success. But I think if done correctly, it can be just as big as anything that the marketing team and us fans, it can be as big as anything we want it to do, as long as everything is done correctly. I must say it's been brilliant speaking to you today. It's good to have a change from constantly interviewing guests and stuff, and instead just having a good relaxing chat about rugby league, because it's, and like you mentioned, it's good for you to be the speaker rather than the interviewer. So it's been brilliant having you on the show today. Thanks for joining us. I'm looking forward to the 2022 season 100%. I think there's big things to come next year, with Toulouse now being promoted and stuff. I do think KR will do well, and as long as they finish below Warrington, I'm not fussed what happens, to be honest. I do think they'll do well. But yeah, it's definitely a season to look out for. And like I'll mention one more time, if you've not already, go and take a listen to the Red Robin podcast. I'll leave all the links in the description below if you want to jump over. Cheers for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, mate. Anytime.
Cheers, mate. See you later.
Bye-bye, pal.
Cheers.
Say live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let die.
Thanks again to our podcast partner Recovery for sponsoring today's episode. Head over to recovery.com to check out their range of all natural products, and remember to use the code DROPGOAL in all capitals at checkout for 10% off all of your orders.